You want to be opening up your Bibles to Luke chapter 15. In just a few moments, I'll be reading from there. We've got some introductory passages to look at, and we'll look at them in a moment. But our main text will be over there. Before we get there, let me just take a couple of minutes. This is my last time to stand before you before I head out of town this afternoon. I just want to express my appreciation to the good brethren here for inviting me to come and speak to you this week. Although, thinking like Mark and myself, we may be citizens of the United States and citizens of Canada. There's no greater citizenship than in heaven. But having said that, coming here, this is not our home, but you know what I mean by this. Coming back to Ontario, for me, it is like coming home. The family that I love dearly, and it's just a joy to be here with you all and to be back in Canada. I miss you all very much. I miss the brethren up here. You know, I like that camaraderie where brethren know the faithful churches. You know, somebody said to me one time, I was up in Ontario, and there's this brother, I can't remember his name. He says, "You might know him." I says, "Might?" I says, "If you know the name, I know." Okay, because you know the brethren up there, and I like that we know one another and we encourage one another. And having said that, I just want us to be aware of the fact that, you know, we all know people who have fallen away. And I'm sure we have met people or know people that have fallen away who told you one time they're never going to fall away. We don't go into becoming a Christian saying, well, this is only temporary. Well, no, our goal is to remain faithful. I remember a young convert in Jordan one time. He was just baptized, and we were studying the parable of the sword. He said, "I'm the good soil." And I go, well, yeah, now. And hopefully you'll stay that way. But remember, the parable talked about being choked by the cares of the world and persecutions. And he didn't last that long. None of us want to fall away. And I hope that is our goal. Obviously, we want to endure to the end. Let me just share a couple of verses over here in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1. Paul came right out and told Timothy. He says, "The Spirit expressly says that in the latter times some will depart from the faith." I don't want to depart from the faith, and I'm sure you don't want to depart from the faith either. And therefore, we need to understand that we need to make sure that we stay on solid ground. And Hebrews, the 3rd chapter, Hebrews chapter 3, it mentions in verse 12 the warning, "Beware, brethren." As we talk, beware, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. It is ever possible that you and I can depart from the Lord. You know, you look at 1 Samuel, we won't go into the life of David in 1 Samuel 13 and verse 14, and you go at Acts 13:22, when he's described as a man after God's own heart. Does that describe you right now as a man after God's own heart? Because I'm going to tell you that you're not immune to temptation and the sins that are out there. It can happen to any one of us. Thankfully, David came back. Thankfully, David made things right. But you and I need to make sure that we stay faithful to the Lord. Have you ever had something happen to you where you said, "Man, I didn't even see that coming. I didn't even see it coming." And it happened because we didn't pay attention. Maybe with the car. Oh, man. To this day, I don't even like telling the story, but I was like, I had to have hit this lady's dress. I was that close because the sun was in my eyes, and I looked that way, and there's nothing there. And I was coming over to the post office in Nebraska, and I just said, well, nothing's coming. Let me just gun it. So I turned around, and a lady had been walking across the street. I had to hit them. If I'd have done it just a second earlier, I'd have hit her. You know, and I was like, man, I didn't even see her. But you know what? Something much more serious than that is our spiritual well-being. And it's vital that you and I stay faithful to the Lord. And the dangers of falling away is definitely real. And that's why we looked at these passages just a moment ago. So this brings us to a very familiar passage in Luke chapter 15. So what's this about? Well, this is the parable of the prodigal son. Oh, I know that story. Yeah, I know that story, where the son left and he wasted his life in prodigal living. But remember what our lesson is. Obviously, I'm not reading the whole parable. What do you mean? Well, we're talking about departing from the Lord. A lot of times we look at the parable of, which is rightly so, we study the parable and talk about how he wasted his life with prodigal living, how he hit rock bottom, how he came back. Well, that's not the departing. The departing's in the first 3 verses. And I believe that if we look at his example of what caused him to depart, which the Lord has given us by inspiration, this parable, we can make the applications for us and say, you know what? I need to look for that, because if there's any of those signs in my life, I'm going to be drifting. I'm going to depart from the Lord. And that's why, and I'm sure some of you can say it. I know I can say it. But when somebody would say to me, so-and-so fell away, I've been known to say, doesn't surprise me. You ever done that? Well, that doesn't surprise me. Why? Because I saw those signs. Now, they didn't see them, and that's the problem. That's why we're going to be talking about it today. Is that, you know what? When I go and visit to brethren who have drifted away, do you know what they often tell me? Chuck, I'm okay. Well, of course you think you're okay, because you drifted away from the standard. It's like a person who doesn't look in a mirror. You know, I'm fine. My hair's fine. Have you looked in a mirror? Well, no. Well, how do you know you look fine? You know, of course, you're going to think you're okay without looking. We're to look into the perfect law of liberty. We see ourselves as we really are. And the less you look at the Word of God, spiritually, you're going to say, man, I look pretty good. Have you looked lately? And so when you look at this, here's the standard. You let man set the standard, you're going to be in all kinds of trouble. So let's go ahead and read a little bit. I say the first 3 verses. I really meant to say the first part, you know, when he actually left. Okay, so we're going to read up to where he actually left. And there's more verses than that. So let me start in verse 11 of Luke chapter 15. So I say the first 3 verses, the first few verses of the parable. He said, a certain man had 2 sons, verse 11. And the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of good that falls to me. So he divided to them his livelihood. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country. That's all we need. That's all we need to read right now. Why? Because that's the drifting. That's the departing, right? And so what lessons in those few verses can we apply to us to help us learn? Well, I don't want to depart, because the whole idea is leaving the Lord. The whole idea is here's a person who is represented as people today who leave God. And this one said to his father, give me, well, let's just get into our point. And just to give you an idea, we're looking at how many, let's make sure to remind ourselves of this. It's a simple lesson. It's 4 points. It's a 4-point lesson. Okay. Signs before he left. What could you learn? Did you learn anything from him? You say, well, it doesn't say much. Doesn't say much. Well, think about it. Think about this young man, what you learned about him before he left. First thing. I touched on this a little bit earlier this week. You remember? I mean, look what it says here. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me. I like the way Kelly and William, you know, if the little one there, Linda, goes, you know, if that little one were to say, give me my breakfast, they'll say, what? Excuse me? What are you saying? Oh, well, may I have some breakfast, please? There you go. Say it right. You train them, right? You train them. You don't train them. What happens is you're going to train them a different way. You're going to train, and a lot of children today are being trained to be arrogant, stuck on themselves, deserving of everything. Whatever I want, I'm going to get. That's how they're being trained. So they have this attitude of entitlement that they have out there. You act as if something is owed to you. Child, it has that attitude, and we can have that. Look at Luke 17. We're close by there. Luke chapter 17. And let's notice what he mentions here. Verse 6, or verse 5 talk about increase our faith. Verse 6 says, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you can say to the mulberry tree, be pulled up by its roots and be planted in the sea, and it would obey you. And which of you, having a servant plowing or tending sheep, would say to him when he has come in from the field, come at once and sit down to eat? But will he not rather say to him, prepare something for my supper, and gird yourself, and serve me till I have eaten and drunk, and afterwards you will eat and drink? Does he thank that servant because he did the things which were commanded him? I think not. Now here's the point here is verse 10. So likewise you, when you have done all those things which are commanded, you say, we are unprofitable servants. We have done that which is our duty. If you have Bible studies, you're not earning salvation. You're not earning salvation by worshiping God here today. Well, I'm here worshiping God in spirit and in truth. Yeah, that's your duty. You don't earn your salvation. Worshiping God doesn't earn your salvation. Well, then what am I doing worshiping God? Well, if you don't worship God, you're going to miss heaven. Because you're commanded to do it. And that helps you grow. And he understands that. And so this attitude that we have here in worship, it's a privilege. And it isn't the idea that I'll give God my leftovers. Well, if I have time, I'll worship God. And then I'll tell God, well, you need to be thankful that I'm here. What? And so this attitude of entitlement of people departing, and God, as I mentioned earlier this week, that's why God is not mocked. The Bible says God is not mocked. Now, parents can be mocked, but God is not. And I really try to drive that home because I know some people who have fallen victim to this and have trained their children to have an attitude of entitlement because they have given their children everything that they want. Everything. But God, you don't argue with God. Like Jesus. There's the door. Do you want to leave? Okay, go. And with parents, it's that easy, isn't it? With parents, it's kind of like when the kids get a little bit older. Okay, because you did that, you're grounded for a day. You want to make it 2? You want to make it 3? Yeah, now they don't shut up, right? They're got to be quiet now because I'm getting deeper in trouble. Mom and dad are staying calm. And they're saying, you want to make it 2 days? You want to make it 3 days? They're not yelling. No, because they're in control. They're in control. But the parent who tells the child, stop, 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 stop. Okay, go ahead. Well, there you go. God just became the parent. You became the child. You got to be consistent. You're the parent. You're the one in charge. But if you give them everything that they want, then you can have this attitude of entitlement. Now, this person, it wasn't like the father's, is to blame here. Just give me. But the point was, I wanted you to see before he even left is the point. He had this attitude of just give me my portion. Just give it to me. And there was no gratitude. There was no thankfulness. Of course, that reality came a little bit later in the story, right? Where he realized a lot of things about his father. And for you and I, we need to learn to nip things and to remember that we want to help people understand what the responsibilities are and not have this attitude of demanding. I will make this one point before I move on, because we were reading this earlier in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, teaching about family and teaching about responsibilities. We did that in our Bible class today. The idea that I want us to see here is, and it's happened twice, once within the last month and one happened a number of years ago, where this parent was giving their child everything they want, even as they grew older. They wouldn't pay their rent. Oh, I'll pay your rent. Didn't pay their car payment. I'll pay your car payment. Every time the person did something wrong, the parent bailed them out. Always there, financially taken care of anytime they ran into a problem. I just want you to understand this very important principle. That daughter, we withdrew from. She's older with kids. We withdrew from her. But you know what happens when she's in earshot of me? She tells me how much she hates her mom. Now, she doesn't tell her mom that because she gets all she wants from her mom. Anytime she calls her mom gives her money, bails her out, doesn't hold her accountable. She hates her mom. How can you hate your mom? She gives you everything. Her mom it would tear her apart to know that. So when I preach on this, I try to let people understand that you need to understand, you're not helping people, but people have this attitude. If you have an attitude of entitlement, of what you deserve as a Christian, because I've had people come up to me when I was an elder. You're supposed to have me in your house. You're supposed to feed me. Excuse me? Attitude of entitlement. I'm not having you over, but I expect you to have me over. The church. I expect the church to pay for my rent. I've had people do that. I've had members of the church talk about, I'm in a bind right now, and I want you guys to help me. Well, do you have anything to sell? You have to think that I just cuss them up and down. What do you mean, do I have anything to sell? Well, you're not really in need. If you've got something to sell, and churches are guilty of creating members having an attitude of entitlement when you don't hold them accountable. You budget your money, and it's one thing that when you're in need, but when you bring on this problem, I said this before, and a member of the church, I don't know who I shared it with. Member of the church comes up to me and he tells me, Chuck, he says, I'm buying a new house. Good for you. I'm signing the papers on Monday. That's great. Chuck, I went to the casino and I blew all the money. My brother talked me into it. I need that money by tomorrow. I'm not giving it to you. I'm not paying for your mistake. I pay for his mistake. What does he do the next time? Goes off, if I go and lose more money and then somebody will bail me out. No, you're going to have to own up to it. Well, he came forward. He made it right. He's doing great, by the way. Strong, good. I'll never do that again. He learned his lesson. But he went the next day and told them what happened. And boy, were they mad at him because he signed the contract and he was supposed to have that money. And they just said, well, we'll just put it on the end of your mortgage and you'll have a longer mortgage. So he got through that little hump, but he had to hold himself accountable. And see, what we're saying as a church and our responsibility, this prodigal son had an attitude, give me, give me, give me. And if we have that attitude, we're not going to contribute, we're not going to help. And I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. We'll be faithful, quote, faithful, until I don't get my way, and I'm gone. I've seen it. Where people say, Chuck, can you believe that guy was a member of that church for 20 years? Yeah, but he had that attitude for 20 years, and then finally he didn't get his way, and he left. And so you want to know a sign of departure in your life or a sign of departure in my life is when I have an attitude of entitlement. And you say to yourself, Chuck, I don't have that attitude. I just do not have that attitude of entitlement. Really? I've told some people, we had some golfers at home. I said, what if I inherit a golf course? And I say, you ought to come over and play our course. You come over, I say, that'll be $20. What? You're going to charge me to pay? There are members of the church that have Chick-fil-A. People go there. I've had members say, I'm going over to Darren's place because I'm going to get some free food. You don't think you have an attitude of entitlement? Brother so-and-so is a mechanic. He works on it. He goes and gets parts, and you're giving me a bill? You see, we can be just as guilty of having the attitude of entitlement. I have known brethren that have sacrificed and done a lot for brethren and not as much even get a thank you in return. Why? Because they're supposed to do that. They're brothers and sisters. Now, if the mechanic wants to do it for free, that's fine. Oh, no, that's okay. That's okay. I tell brethren, at least offer. Don't have this attitude that you're supposed to do that because you're my brother and sister. You're supposed to do those things. I'm going to tell you, brother, that's a sign. That's a sign of departure right there, of drifting away when we have that expectation within the attitude of the church. Well, that just leads into the next one, because this is what happened. Because what happened here, and we see it in the story, it's made crystal clear. Look at verse 17. Look at verse 17, Luke 15. It says, but when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? Now, see, this is after he takes his money, he goes off, he wastes it with prodigal living. He's ending up, he's feeding the swine. He's so hungry. He's so hungry. And by the way, before I forget the point, I made it earlier, but some of you weren't here. Before I forget the point on this one, if you'd have run into that prodigal son and you saw him feeding the swine, would you have been inclined to give him some food? It would have been the worst mistake you could have ever done. Well, I need to have some compassion. He brought it on himself. A man doesn't work, he doesn't deserve to eat. You know, I could have helped that guy who gambled out you, but you're not helping them. If you'd have given him something, he wouldn't have come to himself. We need to understand this principle, guys, in helping people. Your children, you want them to stand on their own 2 feet. Help them. And as soon as I was at home and I was living at home, I was out of school, my dad says, okay, you're going to start paying board. I'm like, what? I got to pay board? You know, welcome to the real world. Grow up. I get that, right? Now, look what happened here. I just read it. What happened when he hit rock bottom? Oh, now he's thinking about his dad. Well, how do you know your father gives the servants enough food to even spare? Because I remember how generous he was. I remember my dad he was a good man. He was a good man. See, but what happened prior to that, you know, a sign of drifting, you don't appreciate what's done. And that's kind of overlapping a little bit, but I'm just talking about this idea of lack of appreciation. And for you and I, we understand how important it is to be respectful and to be thankful. And we were reminded of a few of those principles this morning, because really Jeremy was dealing with Romans chapter 5. We come around the table here. Doesn't it humble us? It's not like, God, you need to thank your lucky stars I'm even here to remember you. It's kind of like somebody going to a funeral and wants to walk in and make an entrance. Well, I'm here. I'm here to show my respects. I'm a wonderful person. I want the family to know that I'm great. Who goes to a funeral? Well, who comes around a memorial like that? Well, we wouldn't. But I hope we understand that we do appreciate what Jesus did for us. And that's what Jeremy was trying to get across today. I'm not saying trying as if he failed, but he did. So he says in Romans chapter 5, for when we were still without strength, in due time Christ died for the ungodly. And then he went on to talk about how the God demonstrated his love. It humbles us to remember his death. And we appreciate what he's done for us. And I like parents. I love parents. It's been all this week. You know, you give something. Linda, what do you say? What do you say? You're teaching them to say thank you. But I have seen people that have things done for them, but they don't appreciate it. Remember that person was mocked her mom? Wait a second, how can you say you hate your mom? She bails you out all the time. Well, she wants without appreciating. How many want to go to heaven? Well, I want to go to heaven. Well, do you appreciate what's gone on for you? What do you mean? Well, you know, some friends are going out. They asked me to go voting on Sunday. You know, I'll remember the Lord's death next week. Boy, you sure don't appreciate what the Lord has done for you. You know, you come and you remember the Lord's death. You come and you worship him. You appreciate everything that he's done for you. We are a thankful people, aren't we? We're thankful. We're supposed to be that way. And maybe it's just my age. I don't know. But I'll go to some stores and I'll just like, you're welcome. You're welcome. You know, well, Chuck, you should just be kind and not expect that. Well, really? That's interesting. He healed the 10 lepers and 1 came back. He says, well, where's the other 9? Well, you got to be thanked? No, they need to be thankful. That's the point. You're trying to teach them what they need to do. They should have come back. And so when I'm opening the door and I'm like going, you're welcome. You know, you want them to be respectful. It hasn't ruined my day. Life goes on. I'm a happy camper. I'll open the door up for somebody else again. Right? But you're wanting other people to learn. You want people to learn to appreciate what was done for them and the sacrifices that were involved. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 6. And every one of us here can appreciate this. 1 Corinthians chapter, I would hope we do. 1 Corinthians chapter 6. I read this last night, but I want to make this point. Because in verse 9, he talks about all these different sins, such as homosexuality, sodomy, Look at verse 11. Such were some of you. Wait a minute. Such were some of you. Some of you, wait a minute. Some of these Christians were idolaters, adulterers, homosexuals, sodomites, thieves, covetous, drunkards, revilers. Who taught them? Aren't you thankful somebody taught you the truth? Aren't you thankful that somebody took the time to present the gospel to you? Maybe we're not evangelistic like we should be because we just take it for granted and we don't really appreciate what was done for us and how that people went out of their way and they were patient. And I think of the times that I was studying and I left the study and I can remember arguing sometimes and putting my fist through the wall. I remember some of those frustrations that were there. But you become a Christian, you're thankful. And I'm thankful for the patience of my brethren. I'm thankful for their encouraging me over the years. Why I am where I am today. Say, Chuck, how did you do this? I love talking to people, but you guys don't know. I'll mention Mary Harrison. Who's Mary Harrison? Well, I remember Mary Harrison. Chuck, are you going to preach? I'll get up there and preach. And it's like turn in your Bibles, and there's like a 5-minute pause because I can't find the passage. And I'm just preaching a basic passage, a Bible lesson on becoming a Christian. And there's Mary Harrison. She's hearing the plan of salvation, being baptized, becoming a Christian. Tears are coming down her eyes. You don't think that encourages you? Folks, I have my first sermon on tape. Mark's on it too. It's not pretty. Okay. From a standpoint of, flowing and, I listen to it from time. And it's humbling. But I'm thinking, the brethren were such an encouragement to me. And I'm thankful for that. Being able to be there for one another. That's what Galatians chapter 6 is all about, right? We were touching on a little bit about edifying. The church edifies itself. But in Galatians chapter 6 and verse 2, bear one another's burden and so fulfill the law of Christ. Appreciate one another. You never get too old to say, thanks. I appreciate what you're doing. But you're gonna drift. I'm gonna drift if I just get to the point where I expect people to come and do those things for me. I'm old. I paid my dues. Come and clean my house. And while they're vacuuming, I'll go, I noticed something over there. Don't you appreciate what's done for you? These are signs of departure. Because this young man, this man in this parable story, now he thinks, my dad was a good man. That would have been kind of good to remember before he left. That would have been a good thing to remember. But see, that was a part of the departure. Look at this. It's in the story. Distance yourself from family. You want to see a sign of departure? I see it all the time. When I see members of the church spending more time with their worldly friends, they have more in common with them. They enjoy being around them more than with their brothers and sisters. And I didn't say that they shouldn't associate with the lost, because how do you reach them? Don't do that, please. And don't spend all your time with your brothers and sisters. The Lord doesn't want us to live in a monastery where we cut ourselves off from the world. Don't get me wrong. I don't want us to do that. The Bible's telling us we need to go into all the world. But you notice what this son did? He went away to afar off. He wanted to get himself away from his family. That's what he did. He went away. And a sign of departure is when people start distancing themselves from their family. There's just so much. I'm just trying to tie this in here. Turn with me over to 1 John chapter 1. 1 John chapter 1, because what this deals with is a great word that I love, and it's being abused over the years, and it's the word fellowship. Fellowship. We are having fellowship right here, okay? Webster, yesterday afternoon when we got together and had a little meal together, that was Webster's fellowship. Webster, okay? But as long as we understand what the Bible's talking about, we have fellowship on a spiritual level. And people think that they'll use a fellowship meal, fellowship. Well, this is kind of our fellowship hall. It's on a spiritual level. Because he talks about it here in 1 John chapter 1. He says in verse 3, that which we have seen and heard and declared to you, that we also may have fellowship with us. And truly our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. And these things we write to you that your joy may be full. This is a message which we have heard it from him and declared to you, that God is light and in him is no darkness at all. If we say we have fellowship with him and walk in darkness, we lie and do not practice the truth. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus Christ, his son, cleanses us from all sin. You know, if I'm not enjoying this, if I'm sitting here at worship service going, come on, get this over with. I want to get to the restaurant. I got big plans today. I got things I want to do. I don't even know what he talked about today. You're worshiping God. I've had people, last person to the services and the first ones to leave, will tell me, I don't feel close to the brethren. Really? I wonder how that happens. When you don't want to be around them, you don't want to talk to them. You know, I absolutely love it. I'll get up at services, and the brethren, I've done this. I've got services. I can't really do it here, but our pulpit's a little bit big, and it's about a minute before our Bible study, and on Wednesday and on Sunday morning, and I'll just go, boom, and people turn their heads, and I'll go, it's time, you know, because they hadn't seen each other all week, and they just love to be around one another, and they're talking and visiting with one another, and I encourage it, and I want it, and talk and laugh, and just be loud. I love it. That's not worship. And this is not a sanctuary. This is not a sanctuary. That's Old Testament, New Testament. It's not a sanctuary. Brethren met in people's homes. You can tell people, this is the living room. This is the living room. We're going to worship God in just a few moments. This is the living room. And so we want people to understand, we love one another, we around one another. And to distance people from family, people don't even know each other. I've asked brethren, I said, do you know what so-and-so does for a living? Do you know what he does? I'll tell them. Do you know what sister so-and-so? Do you know the names of her kids? Do you know this? Do you know that? Do you know where they live? I'm just telling them, do you know one another? Because people are distancing themselves from their brothers and sisters. And you distance yourself from brothers and sisters, and you want to go to heaven? So nothing shocks me. Nothing shocks me anymore when people, don't you just love Genesis? Well, this is what I love with the Old Testament. Genesis 13 and verse 8. What's Genesis 13 and verse 8? Abraham saying to Lot and his family that they were fussing, right? And he goes, we're family. He says, we're family. We shouldn't be fighting. We're family. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And this guy, I'm thinking, this young man, he goes, you got a brother there? You've got your dad? And you load up? I'm gone. I'm out of here. I'm just getting away, far off. See, folks, that's a sign of departure. You don't feel close to your brethren, nothing wrong. You need to work at that. You need to spend time with them and enjoy that, because our spiritual family, we're to edify and build up one another, be there for one another. Do you feel like, I can think of right now, if something happened 1 o'clock in the morning, I know there's people I can call up and they're not going, really, Chuck, now? They're not going to say that. They're going to say, I'll be right over. Brothers and sisters, you count on them because you stay close to them and you know where they are. You know, we don't go to services and everybody's going, where's brother so-and-so? You know, people go, somebody might say, hey, where are the Keaches? Oh, they're in Indianapolis this weekend visiting them. We know where everybody is. That's what family's all about, right? And you want to see a sign of departure? There it is. Distance yourself from your brothers and sisters, and that's going to get you into all kinds of trouble. And you know, when you look at the text of Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25, 25, you know, don't forsake the assembly. What's verse 24? 24. Stirring up one another to love and good work. That's what we do. We look forward to being with our brothers and sisters. It isn't like, oh, do I have to? You know, it's like me right now. Oh, do I have to go see my mom this afternoon? I haven't seen her in a year. Do you think I'm sitting here going, oh, do I have to go see her? Come on, you know I want to see her. Right? I want to see her. That's fleshly family. But I got news for you. I'm closer to my spiritual family than my fleshly. And I want to be with my spiritual family. And you're not going to keep me away from it. Okay. What do you think the last one is? A sign of departure. Well, it's right there in the story. It's right there when he left. What did he do? He had a longing for worldliness. Worldly living is what it tells us over there in Luke, the 15th chapter. It tells us that in verse 13. And not many days after, the young son gathered all together his journey into a far country, and there wasted his possession. He knew what he was doing. I'm going, and I'm going to have myself some fun. And I'm telling you, folks, if worldliness appeals to you, watch out. You'll be gone. You'll be gone. We had a man, Kirk was at, a couple of weeks ago. Kirk was sitting on the front row. He's 83 years old. He was baptized a couple months ago. And I said, how many looked at Kirk, and said, wow, he obeyed at 83 years. I wish I had waited till I was 83 years old because, he got to enjoy all that sin all those years. Nobody's going to say that. When somebody becomes a Christian at 83 says, I wish I'd have done this sooner. A family, friends, he could have influenced. And so when you think of a person says that, well, I didn't get to enjoy those sinful things. What are you talking about? You're not missing out on things. I don't care if it goes over on the internet if my mom ever hears this, but my mom told me when I went to her one time and I said, you know what? I'm going to become a preacher. You know what she told me one day? She says, I told my friend at work that you're going to become a preacher. She says, you know what she said? I said, no. She goes, oh, what a shame. I'm thinking, why did she say that? Because she wanted me to think that I'm going to miss out on something. Boy, I'm going to miss out on what? I have family, they laugh and talk about getting so drunk that they throw up. Yeah, they threw up, and I was hungover. That's appealing? It's not appealing. Wait, but worldliness, to dress like the world, the entertainment of the world, is that really what we want? Is that what we're striving for? You guys know I have to read this text. Sorry, I'm going a little bit over. But what are we going to do? Say, Duck, you're done here? Yeah, I will. Go home. Okay. In 1 John chapter 2, 1 John chapter 2, we know this. He says, he comes right out and says it in verse 15, do not love the world or the things that are in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of this world. You want to be worldly? I don't want to conform to this world. Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. I don't want to be conformed. I want to be transformed by the renewing of my mind. I don't want to fit into this world. A member of the church told me, he let his girls dress whatever they wanted because he said, I wanted them to fit in. Well, there's something to be proud of. I tried to get my kids early on to understand that don't worry about what other people think. Remember the Beamville Strawberry Run, guys? I don't know if you ever remember that. They had Beamville Strawberry Run, 5K. I showed up there to run because I'm a runner. And I had these red track pants, and I cut them off down there, and I just cut them with scissors, and they're all jagged, and my kids are going, Dad, you're embarrassing. They would say that. They were young. Oh, Dad, that's embarrassing. I said, I don't care. I'm trying to teach them, don't care what other people think. Just dress modestly is the point. And everybody's looking at me, everybody's got these skimpy little things on, and they're probably looking at me going, that guy's crazy. He's nuts. Who cares? I don't care. But when you have a longing for worldliness, and you hear how we're supposed to live, it's not that important. It isn't very long before we live. We just live. Because we don't like that standard. What happens is they'll say, man, I did not sign up for that. I want to be a Christian on my terms. I want both. And you cannot serve two masters, folks. And people got one foot in the world, and they think they got one foot in the church. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. The church is teaching the way they're supposed. It isn't very long, but that person goes, man, he's telling me I can't have it both ways. And that's what the Word of God tells us. You can't have it both ways. The final passage I'm going to share with you, and then we're done. And that's over in James chapter 1, verse 27, where it talks about pure religion. The final word in James chapter 1 is keep yourself unspotted from the world. I'm in this world, but I'm not to be of this world. There are things in this world that I enjoy. God has given us so many wonderful things that we can enjoy. You love the outdoors. You love to camp. There's some wonderful things, wholesome things that we can do. But, camping can become a curse if we want to do that more than putting God first. Anything that's good and wholesome that's out there. I'm playing hockey and I lay down there. try to be a good example. That I enjoy it, but I'm not putting that above the Lord. And I tell them, you know what? They're not my brothers and sisters. I'm not close to them. They want to go off and do stuff afterwards. I'm not a part of that. And so we need to understand that we love the church. And I hope that these series of lessons helps us to realize that we have a faith that we need to make sure that we hold on to, because people can leave the faith. You can depart from the faith. There's no such thing as once saved, always saved. Oh, you can be once saved and stay saved. That's good. That can be achieved. But as long as we're aware of this, we apply 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 12. And that is, take heed lest you fall. Don't sit there and say, that'll never happen. You just say, it could happen to me, but I'm not going to let it happen. It could. I could tell you that. It could happen to me, but I've got to stay aware of things. Beware of the dangers that loom. And if I work and learn these lessons, I can stay on the straight and narrow. Let that be our goal. Now, if you're not a Christian, I want to encourage you to become one. Child of God that's gone wayward, you need to come back to the fold on his terms, James 5:19 and 20. But brethren, let's be aware. Let's be growing and want each other to help us get there. If you're subject to it anyway, let it be known as we stand together and sing 608.